Because of the fact that the questions today all deal with contracts and ultimately unexpired leases because they're a form of contract, and because these videos are supposed to be somewhat self-contained, I'd like to set the stage with just a little bit of background information, maybe a couple of definitions as well. So the focus of contracts and unexpired leases in the Bankruptcy Code is found in Section 365, which is quite confusing and rather labyrinthine. So keeping some of these ideas in mind will help. So when the debtor is considering bankruptcy, the debtor has assets and the debtor has debts, obligations. Filing that Chapter 11 petition creates a bankruptcy estate. What goes into the estate is all of the debtor's assets, whether they are tangible assets, intangible assets, rights, they all go into that estate. And then the obligations become claims against that estate. Now, unlike other chapters such as 7 or 13, where there is a chapter trustee, either a Chapter 7 trustee or a Chapter 13 trustee, generally in Chapter 11, there is no chapter trustee unless it's the special subchapter 5 of Chapter 11. So as a result, since there's nobody minding the store that's called a trustee, the debtor becomes a quasi-trustee called the debtor in possession. And the debtor has a fiduciary duty to that bankruptcy estate that's created to manage it, primarily for the benefit of the creditors. And you might think, well, wait a minute, if I'm going into a bankruptcy, isn't it for my benefit? Well, yes. As a business going into a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, ultimately you're looking to reorganize and come out of it financially healthy. But at the same time, as the debtor in possession, that's the title given to the debtor, there is that obligation, that fiduciary duty to manage the estate well. Now, because there isn't that Chapter 11 trustee sort of keeping the debtor on a tight leash, two other entities get a big role in the matter. One is the Office of the United States Trustee, and that office will monitor the debtor's financial progress, primarily through what are called monthly operating reports, which each month give a financial CAT scan of what's going on. And the judge. The bankruptcy judge has a large role in Chapter 11 cases and serves as sort of the gatekeeper. So whenever things have to be resolved, they go before the judge. Now, we're talking about contracts, and I did mention unexpired leases. What exactly is a contract? Well, a classical law school definition is it's an agreement, a bargain for agreement between two parties where each party provides consideration to the other party in exchange for the consideration it's receiving. An executory contract is a contract where both parties still have obligations under the contract. And then a lease is a special kind of contract. You can think of it as an extended rental lease. Sometimes that may be on real estate, it might be on equipment, whatever it is. And so when the debtor files that petition, the bankruptcy estate is created, those contracts become assets of the estate. And then the question arises, will this contract be a benefit to the estate or will it be burdensome? So when a contract is burdensome, one thing that the debtor can do is reject the contract, or if it looks like it's going to be a benefit to the estate, then the debtor can assume the contract. And how are the contracts affected by Chapter 11? Well, the first thing is to consider the non-debtor participant in the contract who may be a little bit spooked by what's going on with the Chapter 11 case. That can create some problems, but the Bankruptcy Code, as I mentioned in Section 365, does at least allow that debtor in possession to assume the contract. Now, it can't be to the harm of the other party in the contract. And so there are conditions that have to be met. For example, if there's been a default in the contract, then there has to be prompt curing of that default. But in any event, contracts can be dealt with in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, primarily either by assuming the contract or rejecting the contract. All of these things, however, as I said a little bit ago, must be approved by the judge. And we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of that as this session progresses.